We begin with that breaking news out of France. The world watching the high-stakes presidential election there. Centrist candidate Emmanuel Macron appearing with his wife, celebrating a decisive victory over the far-right's Marine Le Pen, winning by a landslide margin of about 30 points. A huge celebration in front of the Louvre. Thousands of supporters cheering, waving French flags.
Macron, President!
At the Louvre, this was the moment of victory. Supporters of Emmanuel Macron overjoyed and filled with pride in their country.
There's triumph and relief in this crowd. Many of these voters thought the soul of France itself was at stake, so this victory is especially sweet.
Macron, at just 39, becomes France's youngest leader since Napoleon. And tonight, he walked into history, telling the crowd,
Tout le monde nous disait que c'était impossible.
Everyone said it was impossible.
Mais ils ne connaissaient pas la France.
They didn't know France. Macron's victory is a resounding rejection of the far-right nationalism of his opponent, Marine Le Pen. Projections tonight show him winning 65% to 35% over Le Pen. Their bitter battle drew in two American presidents, Barack Obama endorsing Macron.
I am supporting Emmanuel Macron to lead you forward.
And President Trump all but officially endorsing Le Pen, recently calling her the strongest on borders and the strongest on what's been going on in France. For French voters, it was about two diametrically opposed views of their future. Le Pen, anti-European Union, anti-immigration, anti-Islam. Macron, pro-EU, pro-immigration, more comfortable with diversity. For many voters, it was more about defeating Le Pen than electing Macron.
So are you happy that he won or happy that she lost, or both?
Both.
Both.
To be honest, both.
Chancellor Angela Merkel's Conservatives have won a decisive victory over their Social Democrat rivals in a vote in Germany's northern state of Schleswig-Holstein. The CDU won with 33% compared to the SPD's 26%. The result is a boost for Merkel ahead of September's general election.
Abby, well, first it was Butler University, a small private college in Indiana, offering an anti-Trump course. Now an Ivy League school is following suit.
Of course. Well, Cornell is joining the resistance by adding a class this fall called America Confronts the World. The course description reads, Donald Trump and Barack Obama give two visions of America and the world. Get this, xenophobic nationalism, and for Obama, it's pragmatic cosmopolitanism.
What's the latest trend these days? Mean moms. They come in all sizes and socioeconomic classes and live in no specific zip code. A mean mom will criticize your parenting style, call you out on Facebook, or slather you in snark. These are the mean girls, all grown up and blossomed into adult bullies with kids of their own. In a recent survey, 80% of millennial moms said they've been shamed by other moms. It's bullying 101. Belittling someone else's choice makes you feel better about your own. People within a social group, like women with kids around the same age, gain stature by tearing down others around them. Bullies are narcissists, and narcissists prop up their self-esteem through the energy of other people.
Accused of being behind a series of deadly attacks, the chief of Islamic State in Afghanistan has been killed by US and local forces. Confirmation of Abdul Hasib's death coming on Sunday following a joint raid in the eastern province of Nangarhar last month. The attack saw 35 ISIS fighters and several high-ranking commanders killed, as well as 2 US Army Rangers. Hasib was appointed head of ISIS in Afghanistan last year after his predecessor died in a US drone strike. He's believed to have directed a number of strikes, including one on Kabul's main military hospital in March that killed dozens of people. Hasib is also said to have ordered fighters to behead local elders in front of their families, as well as kidnap women and girls to force them to marry ISIS militants. Defeating the group is one of America's highest priorities in Afghanistan. The top US commander saying Hasib's death marks an important step in what he calls America's relentless campaign against the group.
Reuters has reported that at least 2 people were killed and 6 injured when multiple Islamic State suicide bombers attacked a base in northern Iraq where U.S. military advisors are stationed. In addition, 2 of the militants died when they detonated their vests at the entrance to the K-1 base overnight, and 3 more were killed by Kurdish Peshmerga forces who control the Kirkuk area where it is situated. One officer told Reuters they were wearing uniforms like the Kurdish Peshmerga and had shaved their beards to look like us.
Islamic State militants left a gruesome scene behind this weekend as they left the decapitated bodies of a man and his 2 sons lying in the streets of Rafah. Rafah is a small town on the border of Israel and Gaza, and the mother of the family was allegedly killed a week prior by Islamic State terrorists during a raid of their home in Yamit, west of Rafah. The family was suspected of collaboration, and the 3 men were kidnapped. ISIS has been increasing the rate of kidnappings and raids in their recent insurgency in the Sinai Peninsula, and the brutality is meant to serve as a message to would-be collaborators or informants. ISIS in the Sinai has also been known to attack the Christian minority in the region, having attacked 3 churches since December. In a message sent to the West, a Sinai branch ISIS leader said that, quote, targeting the churches is part of the war on infidels, and that any institution or post where crusader nationals of Western countries gather are legitimate targets. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is expected to warn the Israeli cabinet that the United Nations cannot be evicted from Jerusalem. Last week, Minister of Culture and Sports Miri Regev demanded that the United Nations be evicted from Jerusalem after UNESCO passed a resolution denying that Israel has any historical or legal ties to the city. UNESCO, or the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, has a regional office at the UN compound in Jerusalem's Armon HaNatziv neighborhood. The compound was first leased to the UN by Israel in 1967, following the Six-Day War, to monitor the ceasefire between the Jewish state and its Arab neighbors.
Militant Palestinian group Hamas has elected a new leader, further hinting the organization is trying to soften its image. Ismail Haniyeh, a former prime minister of the Palestinian Authority, could help bring Hamas back into the international conversation. The U.S. has long considered the group a terrorist organization because of its attacks against Israel. Haniyeh's election comes the same week Hamas released a new set of policy principles, moderating some of the positions outlined in its 1988 charter. Those concessions include shifting blame for Palestinian displacement to occupiers and Zionists rather than Jewish people outright. It also says Hamas will accept the borders of Palestine as dictated by the borders before 1967, when Israel took over the West Bank and East Jerusalem.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dismissed a new policy document released by the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas. Netanyahu says the Palestinian movement is lying to the world.
The new Hamas document says that Israel has no right to exist. It says every inch of our land belongs to the Palestinians. It says there is no acceptable solution other than to remove Israel. So why does Hamas say there's a consensus for a smaller Palestinian state now? In order to destroy Israel later. So where does this hateful document belong? Right there.
The United States State Department is being blasted at the moment as angry Americans born in Jerusalem demand they be allowed to have their place of birth recognized as being part of Israel. Dozens of United States lawmakers have even joined the fight, signing a letter to Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to give in to the demands. The United States State Department has long held a policy of resistance against allowing American births to be recognized as Israeli if born in Jerusalem, as they believe it could hurt diplomatic relations between Israelis and Palestinians. The signatories of the letter, however, argue that the recognition, quote, would cause no perceptible geopolitical impact, but would be meaningful to a number of our fellow citizens. It would honor the individual's personal dignity and cherished personal identification with Israel as his place of birth, end quote. The letter then goes on to cite several other cases in which the State Department gives in to similar requests with ease, as in designating citizens Taiwanese despite the Chinese hold on Taiwan. A law forcing the State Department to accept Jerusalem births as Israeli was passed in 2003 by Congress, but was never enforced by either President Bush nor Obama. It was later overturned by the Supreme Court in 2015. Greg Roman, the director of the Middle East Forum, said, quote, the previous decision to ignore the law passed by Congress was illogical and illegitimate. The Ministerial Committee for Legislation gave its support to a new version of the nation-state bill, which revokes Arabic's official language status in the State of Israel. The committee believes that Israel is, quote, the national home of the Jewish people, and that the right to realize self-determination in the State of Israel is unique to the Jewish people, end quote. The bill will now continue to the Knesset floor for further study before it can become a law. Knesset member of the Joint Arab List Ayman Odeh calls the new Jewish state bill a, quote, declaration of war on Israeli Arabs. He writes that the danger in this law is that it enables two classes of citizens, Jewish and Arab. That being said, the bill received unanimous support in the committee, and though the vote was discussed in the beginning of the meeting, not all members even took part in it. Professor Mordechai Kremnitzer and Dr. Amir Fuchs of the Israeli Democracy Institute sent ministers a critical review, noting that, quote, the bill enshrines Jewish identity without other basic rights such as freedom of speech being enshrined in it, and that the bill considerably harms the rights of the country's minorities. Likud Knesset member Avi Dichter, who approved the nation-state bill, feels that it can be a major step in establishing the Jewish identity of Israel abroad and amongst Israelis themselves.
North Korea has detained another U.S. citizen, bringing the total number of Americans held by the regime to 4.
In a short surprise statement on Sunday, Pyongyang's state media outlet revealed that another U.S. citizen has been detained. The Korean Central News Agency said that Kim Hak-sung was arrested on Saturday for carrying out suspected hostile acts, but no further details have been given. The report said that he was working at the Pyongyang University of Science and Technology, which the institution confirmed on Monday. He was said to be visiting for several weeks to do agricultural development work at the university's experimental farm. A U.S. State Department official said Sunday that Washington is aware of Kim's reported arrest, and because the U.S. does not have a diplomatic mission in Pyongyang, it will work through the Swedish embassy to look into the matter. Kim is the second U.S. citizen and university employee to be detained in recent weeks.
The United States and North Korea are reportedly scheduled to hold unofficial talks in Europe.
North Korean officials and U.S. experts on the regime are reportedly getting ready to hold talks in Europe amid heightened tensions resulting from North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Japan's TVSI reports that Choi Sun-hee, who is in charge of U.S. affairs at the North Korean Foreign Ministry, left for Europe via Beijing on Sunday. It looks like the U.S. is resuming its so-called Track 1.5 dialogue, which involves figures from both the government and the private sector from Washington and Pyongyang. Choi last sat down with former U.S. officials in Berlin and Geneva in early 2016. TVSI forecasts that the talks could cover security, including Pyongyang's nuclear issue, to future U.S.-North Korea relations. The Trump administration has settled on its North Korean strategy of maximum pressure and engagement and hinted it will open the door to dialogue while intensifying economic sanctions and diplomatic pressure. However, watchers say that even when Washington and Pyongyang sit down for such unofficial talks, the two would just be exchanging opinions instead of engaging in real negotiations.
Iran says it will leave no part of Saudi Arabia untouched, except holy Muslim sites if Riyadh, quote, does anything ignorant. Iran's defense minister Hossein Dehghan said the only untouched areas will be Saudi cities of Mecca and Medina. He made that comments in reaction to inflammatory statements by a Saudi deputy crown prince Mohammed bin Salman. Salman had threatened Iran that any struggle for influence between the two countries ought to take place, quote, inside Iran and not in Saudi Arabia.
The Russian capital is preparing for its annual Victory Day parade. This year's event will mark the 72nd anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany.
10,000 soldiers that will be participating in this march, and besides the soldiers, over 110 pieces of armor will be on display. Will there also be a spectacular air show taking place to wrap up this parade, featuring, dozens of helicopters and military aircrafts as well. From what we understand, all 3 airports in Moscow will have to be closed down during the time of the air show to have enough airspace for the show to happen. And one of the highlights of the full dress rehearsal has just begun. The dozens and dozens of tanks that have lined up Tiber Sky Street are now rolling towards the Red Square as we speak. I mean, one thing is to see a tank parked at a museum, but another thing is to see so many of them all concentrated in one area, in action, all moving. From where I'm standing, I can literally feel the ground shaking. Now we know there's over 110 of armored pieces on display, and for the first time this year, Arctic military vehicles will also be on display. I mean, these machines are designed to function under rigorous Arctic climate and also to function on roadless terrain. And for the first time in this year's V-Day parade, they will be on display. And let me just say, I cannot describe how unreal the feeling is to see all these tanks rolling past behind me.
A wildfire in Georgia's Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge has forced dozens of nearby residents to leave their homes, authorities said on Sunday, adding that the blaze might not be fully contained for months. About 130,000 acres, or about a quarter of the refuge, have already burned, said Melanie Banton, a spokeswoman for firefighters and park officials battling the West Mims fire, which began on April 6th. Most of the fire is within the refuge, which straddles Georgia's southeast border with Florida, but is encroaching on private land.
Many people in Quebec, the second most populous province in Canada, spent the weekend in a desperate struggle against advancing floodwaters. Among the hardest hit was the town of Rigaud, along the Ottawa River, just west of the island of Montreal. The mayor ordered mandatory evacuations.
People had to be evacuated, and we put them in boats, and they're crying like babies. I'm sorry, they're at a point where now they are not in a position to decide anymore their own future.
I'm feeling sad. You know, it's been there for 15 years, and it's my home, you know.
Federal authorities have declared a state of emergency, and it's expected to last at least 48 hours. Also, it's expected to give firefighters extra resources to battle the floods. Even the army has been called in, with an extra 1,000 soldiers deployed to the province on Sunday. The waters of Quebec's rivers rose after months of wet weather. Some rivers rose by as much as 10 centimeters after a month's worth of rain fell in one night. A record-setting snowstorm in late March didn't help either. Emergency services now fear the waterlogged ground could result in mudslides. Officials say it will take days to get the situation back to anything that resembles normal.
Authorities have been trying to cope with a major rainstorm on Sunday, playing havoc with traffic on travel across the province. It blew in over the provincial capital, Guangzhou, in early morning. City officials issued a stern warning to residents about its potential impact. And in just a 7-hour period, precipitation in some areas exceeded 400 millimeters. Infrastructure and buildings have been damaged, while there have also been some landslides. No injuries have been reported yet, but the forecast is for more rain across the region.
We end tonight in Japan, where a growing number of people are renting people to pose as family and friends. Adriana Diaz has the story.
Ruichi Ichinokawa runs something called a rental family company, and business has never been better. For a fee, he and his staff will impersonate your parents, your boss, even your spouse.
Have you ever been discovered?
Never.
Never.
It might sound strange, but Ichinokawa's business was immortalized in a 2012 documentary called Rent a Family, Inc. He says his business helps clients navigate the tricky norms of Japanese society.
Why is there so much demand for renting fake family members?
The Japanese obsess over etiquette, manners, and appearances a lot more than Americans do, he said. For my clients, not violating protocol is extremely important. He recently posed as a pregnant woman's father because her real dad disapproved of her engagement. She says he saved the marriage. Across town, another rental's in progress. For $10 an hour, a proudly unhip, middle-aged guy will let you vent and offer his worldly wisdom. This time, self-proclaimed old fogey Takanobu Nishimoto is serving up life lessons. Today, it's dating advice. Nishimoto sees clients almost daily, proving over the hill is underrated. It's because I'm a total stranger that clients can unload even deep, dark secrets, he told us. They'll say, I can't breathe a word of this to anyone I know. In Japan's unusual rental universe, sometimes the services are provided on 4 legs instead of 2. At Tokyo's Dog Heart Shop, patrons pluck down cash to hang out with oodles of poodles, beagles, and a golden retriever named Rika. Japanese are uncomfortable about borrowing things like a dog or a car from a friend, said owner Yukiko Tsuchiya, so it's simpler to rent from a company. Delivery worker Yoshido Yamaguchi is one of her most loyal customers. He travels an hour each way every month to get his canine fix. Playing with dogs is relaxing, he told us. It gives me energy to get back to work. For the pet-deprived and the status-obsessed, the lovelorn and the confused, in Japan at least, you can rent for that.
Finally tonight, family. New evidence that the word is as big as your imagination and your heart. Here's ABC's Lindsay Davis.
Christopher and Christina Sanders came to court in their Sunday best, tissues in hand, overjoyed to be there in front of friends and family. The Sanders family, with 5 biological children and now a total of 11 children altogether.
It's the first time I've had 6 children being adopted by one family.
6 newly adopted kids, all siblings, all fostered by the Sanders.
We just made an agreement, whoever we get, we will keep them.
They kept their word.
I officially have signed the entry, so it's official.
And officially giving the newest Sanders kids their forever family.
We was having a rough life before, and
You feel like you're in a safe place now.
New sisters Chloe and Caitlin dressed as twins.
The best thing about being Caitlin's sister is that I have 2 sisters now. She's the sweetest sister ever, and I love her so much.
For the Sanders, now 13 strong, family is much more than blood.
We're all the same in God's eyes, so the color of anyone's skin, that's never had a bearing on any of this.
Say Sanders! Sanders!